Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for, taking time out on this Sunday morning and join us here. I mean, we as organizers were also struggling to, start the thing here because all getting to meet each other feels so special. And I think this was for us one of the most special thing about this event that, so many people who play such different roles in Indian children's literature are here together. All the way from people who help create the books to the people, who are running home libraries. So it's very special for us, that everyone is here today on a Sunday morning. I'm Parul and I lead Parag initiative, which is the organizer of this event. And as many of you know, Parag is an initiative of Tata Trust which has been around for a few decades with the sole purpose of strengthening the Indian children's literature and library space in the country from the entire end-to-end, like from supporting book development to making sure that it reaches hands of all children in the country. We are an initiative of Tata Trust, and as most of you know, Trust is a philanthropic arm of the Tata Group, which works in different areas of social development. And we are gathered here today, for a session on a book that came out this May, jointly developed by Akhila and Parag. It's a first of a kind, because it brings together collections of writings on the Indian children's literature. And, we hope that the session today helps build more engagement with the book, both on stage and off stage. Funky Rainbow, the traveling children's bookstore, has kindly put up a book stall at the end of the hall. It has several copies of the book as well as, so towards the end of the session, after the session ends, the editors, Sandhya and Shailaja will also be there, if you'd like to, get any of your copies signed by them. And Vidya and Sham have also very kindly put together a very curated collection of books for us here today, both some that feature on the Parag honor list over years, as well as many children's books that have been cited in this compendium. They are very painstakingly brought that together. So we hope that we'll leave enough time after the session ends at 12:30. There'll be time till 1:15 or so for you to also spend some time at the book stall. We've also put a chart there, hoping to hear from you, your one wish for the Indian children's literature sector. So we hope you leave your wishes there. We've been told that, a magical power is here and will make all the wishes come true that we have for our wonderful world of Indian children's literature. So we'll get started. This book has been a labor of love of several years, and what it is today and how it has come together today would not have been possible, without the competence and effort of its editors. So I first request the editors, Dr. Shailaja Menon and Sandhya Rao, to please join me on stage as co-anchors for this event. Shailaja is a language educator who presently leads the literacy initiatives with us at Tata Trust. Sandhya Rao is a journalist, books editor, and writer. I also request Akhila, whose steady and meticulous editorial support has contributed much to the book. Akhila is an early literacy consultant who presently works along with Shailaja in the literacy initiatives at the Trust. The book owes its enriching content to its many authors We are very fortunate to be joined by some of them who live here in Bangalore. I first invite Usha ji to join us on stage. With over 40 years of engagement with children, Usha ji is a librarian and library educator who has contributed immensely to the sector. We are very fortunate to have her with us today. I now request Keerthi to join us on stage. Keerthi is an educator. Keerthi is an educator at Centre for Learning, and many of us know Keerthi more for books like What Did You Ask at School Today?
Kamala.
My bad. I now request Thejaswi to join us on stage. Thejaswi is an educator, independent researcher and education consultant whose passion and expertise for nurturing readers inspires all of us a lot. Welcome. I request Teresa to join us. Teresa leads inclusive design at Chetana Trust, a Chennai-based organization whose work in education of children with special needs is highly respected all across. Welcome. Karthika, please join us on stage. Karthika, like so many of us, transitioned from IT to education, studied MEd at APU, and works presently as a consultant in the impact sector. Welcome. So I think one thing that sort of binds all of us is a shared love for children's literature. And now, we'll have a conversation, around the book, after which we will open the floor for questions.
Yeah, we would like to welcome Lakshmi also. Can she please come?
We are very, where is she? Lakshmi, please come, no? So, we are very happy Lakshmi has joined us, and Lakshmi's sort of, seen much of, seeing this book through, and played a huge part in the entire project management of the book, and thank you so much. Okay, so I'll first start by asking you, Sandhya. Tell us all, how did the idea of the book came about?
Hello, yeah. It was actually one of those, moments when fireworks go off and stars shine and there's much excitement, right? I've been a consultant with Parag for a while, and in the course of one of our conversations, someone who worked before Lakshmi, Karunakaran, she used to head the Parag initiative before Parul. Well, before Lakshmi, there was Swaha Sahu and her assistant Priyanka Singh, and we were just talking about various things that we could do, and that's when the fireworks went off, and we said, how about a book? A collection of critical writings on children's literature in India. There were these odd articles here and there published on maybe publishers' websites, or just the odd magazine here and there. Why don't we try and put together an actual serious collection that will not be academic, Shailaja, but will actually reach out to everybody and anybody who is interested in children's literature. Because all of us felt, and then Lakshmi came on board, and all of us felt that there was a need for a book like this for a whole host of reasons and for a whole host of people. But primarily to also show the world of literature in India and internationally that in the last few years there has been such an active, lively, so much happening in the world of children's literature in India. So that's how this happened, and the Amrita and all of them at Tata Trust took to this idea very kindly, and they were most encouraging, and that's how the team got together. And the first thing we did was to have a kind of a brains trust meeting at which many people who are here were invited, and many others who are perhaps there and who are not here either. So we had meetings over several months, and in order to understand how we should approach this book, what it should say, whom we should call upon to contribute, and all of that. And that's how it got started.
Lakshmi, would you like to add something to this? Like, how did this book come about?
Like Sandhya said, it happened a little before I joined, but I came in I remember coming in with so many projects going on, but this seemed to be one of the most exciting ones. Because I think it was something that many of us, Sandhya, before you all thought about fireworks, many of us quietly wished for. As practitioners, as people who've been in this field for so long, that we do have enough material to go back to understand this field, what it means from different perspectives, the perspective of the book creators, the perspective of people who use it in libraries, perspective of readers. So it's wonderful that it's here. Like Sandhya mentioned, I'm just saying it again, that this book is the labor of love of multiple people and generations, as you can see. It's been going on for about 5 years in the making, and I'm super happy that it's here finally and to share to the world, and I hope all of you read and we have more engagement on this. Thanks.
Thanks, Lakshmi. Shailaja, would you like to, remind us more around the rationale of the book? Why do you think it was important to create such a book?
Well, for one, we didn't have such a volume at all. So I'll come back to that point later. But there's been, as many people in this room know, there's been a lot of activity around children's literature over the last 30, 35, 40 years. This is not to say that there was no activity prior to that. We are not trying to say that all the activity that's worth talking about happened in these last few decades. Children's literature in India draws upon centuries of oral and performative storytelling traditions, as you all know. We all know that because we all grew up with these traditions. So we know that this is not like a recent or a new creation. So we don't mean to be ahistorical in our approach. And we also know that after the British came, the missionaries came, there was a lot of work during the colonial period that sort of laid the foundations. We know that after independence, there was plenty of efforts made around children's literature. And yet, there was something sort of different about the last 30, 40 years. Maybe it sort of coincided with the post-liberalization economy, which created sort of an imagination and a scope and a market for children's literature. And not coincidentally, around the same time, we had NGOs like Eklavya, Katha, we had independent publishing houses like Tara and Tulika and Karidi Tales and so on, sort of set up shop and produce a new kind of children's literature, is slightly different in imagination. For one, it focused a lot on production details, so better design, better illustrations, all of that. And for another, it sort of imagined a new kind of reader for these books. So after independence, we were sort of in a nation-building kind of a project. So there were a lot of literature that was about building a sort of a citizen subject. Whereas after this post-liberalization, again not coincidentally, we moved to more Western, contemporary Western imaginations of the reader, which is individualistic, somebody who selects books by choice, reads for pleasure, responds with a democratic sort of a equality with the adults who are transacting the literature, somebody who doesn't need black and white moralistic tellings. In our imagination, I'm not saying that they don't need, but I'm saying that this is the imagination. So for a more complex, sophisticated, mature kind of a reader, these new kinds of genres of books were being produced. And these also sort of expanded the kind of genres. We have had picture books prior to these last 30 or 40 years, but picture books took on much more significance. Young adult literature came about. A sort of a literary non-fiction, a high quality non-fiction came about, and I'm just naming some of the changes. So, and so many people sort of joined the tribe of people who are sort of creating literature for children, that it felt like this was an opportune moment to pause and reflect on these last 3 or 4 decades. And that too, pertaining largely to the shifts that have happened in the English-speaking world. So we just thought that this is a moment for us to pause and look at both the quantity, the quality, the nuances, etc. of this new kind of books that have been published.
Great, yeah. So help us understand more the scope of this book.
Yes, can we sort of, the TOC will come up when I press this magical?
Yes.
Is my pen blocking anything? No, it's okay.
Is everyone all right?
Yeah. We can read with the backs of our heads.
Yeah.
So what we thought we'd do is sort of just walk you through the table of contents, which many of you may be familiar with, but we have several of the authors sitting here. So we thought we'd have the authors speak about the chapters that they have written. But unfortunately, we were expecting 2 authors from the first section, Radhika and Deepa, both of them at the last minute were not able to make it, so we really missed their presence, and now the onus is on us to introduce you to section 1, which sort of lays the foundation for the rest of the book. So section 1 is mercifully brief. I'm saying merciful because you've seen the size and the weight of this volume. Yes. So we are using it to make paneer and all at home. But anyway, there are just three chapters. The first, by Deepa Kiran, is on the oral and performative traditions. And mind you, as I said, we owe this legacy of children's literature in India to these traditions. She does not comprehensively sort of walk us through all these traditions because they're too numerous to describe, from Harikatha to Yakshagana to Patichitra to, every region has scores of them, named and unnamed, known and unknown, and we've all participated in these traditions. So she does not take it upon herself to sort of walk us through each of these traditions, but she sort of talks about what is common to them and how they are relevant to contemporary children's literature. So, for example, the role of memory, so she starts off with that A.K. Ramanujan a quote that you may have heard of, this philosopher asking a carpenter. Carpenter is using a knife and the philosopher says, is it an antique? Has it been in your family for long? And the carpenter says, yes, it's been here forever, Sometimes the blade has been changed and sometimes the handle has been changed. But it has been passed on from generation to generation. So like that, the oral tradition has been with us for a very long time. So the role of memory and the multi-age audience. So oral and performative traditions typically did not have child audience separately. By and large, they were multi-age sort of audiences. And from that, we have now morphed into sort of segregating children for a special kind of literature. So then she talks about also the hybridization of forms today. One is the separation of the child audience. The second is introduction of technology in unbelievable ways, shadow puppetry in Kerala being operated by robots and, those kinds of things. Even the lighting, it was all oil lamps and all of that. So now moving to electrical lighting and so on and so forth, So there's, technology has come in and the movement into print is a very important hybridization also. You know, when we take our folklores, which have always been orally transmitted, and you commit them to paper, they get a certain kind of form and permanence that perhaps the oral form was, you know, far more fluid. So all these kinds of transformations. And the last thing that she talks about in terms of these hybridizations is fusion. All of us who listen to music understand fusion music. So taking some aspects of the oral traditions and then fusing them. So one of the examples she takes is from Tamil Nadu. There's this Oppari tradition, O-P-P-A-R-I, I don't know if I'm pronounced, Oppari, and that has been sort of fused, mourning for funerals and all of that. So this person called Arivu has fused it with rap and hip and hip hop, whatever, and all of that. I'm not hip, I'm sorry. But could you play, we'll just listen to a small, this thing, it's called Enjoy Enjami. Have you heard?
You must be familiar with it.
अंगदमे ओटार संदनमे मुल्ला मलर कोडी मुत्तारमे एंगूर कुत्ताळमे
तुरुक पय्यम्मा वेत्तल मट्टयम्मा सोमंद कय्यम्मा मत्तलम कोट्टियम्मा तायम्मा तायम्मा एन्न बन्नमायम्मा बल्लियम्मा वेरांडी संगदिय गुरांडी कन्नडिय काणांडी इंदार वेरांडी
अन्न किळी अडियाल मर केळवन्न किळी नल्लबडी वाळ चोल्ली इंद मण्ण कोडुत्ताने पूर्व कुडी.
This is just to give, you wanted to go on, right? But this was just to, as an example. So this is it's in honor of his grandmother, who was sent as a plantation worker to Ceylon. And this is about her life and all of that. So these are actual oral folklore traditions which are taking these new forms. Anyway, so she ends on a sobering note talking about the importance of the survival and revival of these forms as well. So that's in brief the kind of things you'll find in Deepa's chapter. Radhika's talks about is a broad brush stroke of trends in the publishing domain that's many of us may be aware of. Yeah, may I ask you all to put your phones on silent if you don't mind? Yeah. So trends, post-independence trends in the publishing domain. If I do this, will it magically come?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Next one?
Yes.
Yeah, so yes, technologically come. So from, the CBT, NBT kind of post-independence, I'm just doing this very, very briefly. Radhika is not here, unfortunately, and I don't intend to give you the history. I'm just flashing these because it'll sort of bring memories to you. Those of us who have lived that long, it'll bring memories to you. Post-independence, the National Book Trust, the Children's Book Trust, these are 3 books by Shankar. Then these, by the way, my parents are in the audience, and these are books that they bought for me when I was a child. And as you can see, the condition, they're not in excellent condition. But when I was a child reading in the 70s and 80s, they're the Soviet. We were flooded with Soviet and Chinese literature. So these, as you can see, this picture these were the picture books that we saw, and unfortunately you can't see it very well, but they're just gorgeous, these black and white sketches, and illustrations are gorgeous. And they were sold in multiple languages, very, very inexpensive. So in that sense, many of us who have had access to these, we really grew up on a lot of these kind of books.
Remember then is the NCBH, New Century Book House. Some of you might remember. They used to stock these books, and people,
Yes,
those of
yes.
us who were interested in reading would run there to pick up these books.
Yes, yes. So they were the picture books that we had in the 70s and 80s and 60s and all of that. These are, the kind, I'm just giving urban English-speaking upper middle class child that I was in the 70s and 80s. These are the kind of non-fiction books I had access to. They're all falling apart. I was planning to bring a bag full of them. Then Vivek said, this is technology. You can just take pictures and show them. So this is children's history of India, and this is what the inside of it looked like. And that is, you remember the tell me why, tell me how, people who are old enough? So that is what is dust, what is salt, and that I'm just showing you the look and feel of the kind of books that we had. And of course we had, international titles that were created decades, even centuries ago. This is Tom Sawyer and what Katie did, and so on and so forth. So we grew up on books produced elsewhere, for other audiences decades ago. So this is like the bulk of what we had before the 1990s. So Radhika quickly goes over those before she gets into the details of how things changed after. Radhika, as you know, is a founder of Tulika, and how when the independent booksellers came, the things that the book publishers, came, the changes that I've already outlined for you in production quality, in illustration, in editing, all of that, and in the genres, in the content. So she takes her chapter, sort of talks about all this, as well as the challenges that still exist. So I've deliberately left out that part. I've just given you the preview and then not told you what happened after the 1990s, so that you can also take the time to sort of read the book. So it's a cliffhanger. See, I left it. So that's basically what her chapter does. And do I go back? And in the voices, a publisher speak, we have many of these voices section where we bring you a short piece by an author, a publisher, a reader, and so on. So here Shayoni Basu talks about her trajectory. It's a very personal sort of speaking from experience when, publishing was, as she says, delightfully ad hoc to a point where it's a serious profession taken very seriously. And she says that when she started her career, her primary job was to create backlists, good backlists, because the assumption was that Indian children read what children in the West had read several decades ago. So her job was to create good backlists. That was the sum total of the publishing imagination. And then the evolution of that journey to the point in 2012 when she and Anushka Ravishankar, as you know, many of you know, started Duckbill and produced the most amazing, and continue to produce the most amazing kinds of books. So it's just a personal journey. So that
I'd just like to add here that these voices are, as Shailaja said, they're very personal expressions. So the experience may not be the same for all publishers, as they would not be for all illustrators, all writers, all editors. So this is just one voice, and the idea was to, while we had somewhat researched long chapters, we also had personal experiences dotting the book, so that really gives you a sense of the personal that is involved in creating children's books, because there is so much of that. Many people take to writing for children because they themselves have children and they've told them stories. There are just a handful who've looked upon it as publishing for publishing's sake, writing to become an author. Writing to become an author actually comes much, much later, when it became obvious that, oh, well, this is something we can do, and we can maybe not survive on, but do as well. But, so these voices are expressions of personal experiences.
Yes. And while the volume is not academic, it is well researched. The chapters are well researched and very systematically put together. I want to say that. They're not impressionistic necessarily. Yeah. So section 2, how do I get to section 2? Huh?
Keep going ahead.
But then I'll give away other things. Okay. Back. Section. That's that section. So who will? Teju.
Okay, so it falls upon me to look at a section that has probably contributed most to the weight of the book. And probably my chapter, which has probably contributed more in that than any of the others. So this is about the books themselves and what do they contain. So it's about the content of the books. And the content can be looked at in many ways. So if you look at it, as Shailaja was pointing us out, that a lot of these books are picture books. So the first chapter in this section looks at illustrations, and it's by one of our preeminent illustrators of children's book, by Deepa Balsavar, and she takes us through, I mean, it also has a historical sweep of the illustration approach that illustrators have taken in illustrating picture books, but also significant books, examples from significant books, and why these are good books, what a good illustrated book looks like. What does it stand for? What does it do to a reader when they open and they kind of go through it and go from one end to the other? How does it take it through? And what role does do illustrations play in storytelling? So she kind of really captures that. Again, I'm not going to give you a lot of detail. It's just summarizing what these chapters say. And then, of course, we have another preeminent illustrator, Manjula Padmanabhan, who then follows it up with a section on voices of her experience of illustrating books and what that journey has been like. And why, and in a way, that personal voice complements what Deepa is trying to say, which is more like looking at a survey of what has happened over a period of time, but what goes into each book. Again, what Sandhya was saying, in terms of what goes into creating an illustration palette, what goes into kind of bringing ideas together that works for that story. So hearing from, as one of the illustrators who has done it for a long time and done it so well, and is quite a joy to read that. Then, of course, it's my chapter. So when Shailaja approached me for this, and I realized it's like, you're looking at fiction, poetry, and plays. What can you do over that period of time? Because that has the most amount of writing that has come out. So my, approach was to look at some way of looking at these rather than just giving you a survey. And it was, my interest was looking at morals and humor, because these are things that we don't know how to approach. We don't know how to think clearly about. We have very strong opinions on them, and as educators, as parents, as writers, and but we haven't found ways to talk about it as much as our conviction allows us to kind of have an opinion on it. So therefore, do the books work the way they claim to? The way educators, parents are convinced that they work, or they don't work. So the range of voices that there are, can we kind of find a way to understand what's there in the content that has come in the last 40 years? And what would be a way to actually, think about them? And in there, I try to explore all of this. Of course, there's also general trends on what has happened in fiction. But one thing is that, thankfully, I didn't write too much on that, because everybody has covered this in multiple ways. And you see, that's wonderful. What's one wonderful thing about this section, I think also about the rest of the book, is that there are many themes that come through in terms of trends. So the book is talking about what has happened in the last 30 or 40 years, and this particular section is talking about the content, but you see that echoed elsewhere as well. And that is important, because what you see, some examples come through repeatedly. But there are other examples which are, unique to each chapter. So you get like a range of books, introduced to a range of books that have been published in this time. So in there, again, you see, again, of course, fiction, poetry, plays. We also end up ignoring non-fiction because we think children enjoy stories, and or we have the other way around, the opinion that no, non-fiction means general knowledge. I'm just caricaturing it, but that's that's the typical approach of the educator or or the parent, who is also an important audience for this book. So how do we also explore non-fiction? And there you have Nivedita Subramaniam, who's again a very well-known writer-editor who has contributed and brought together this lovely chapter on creative non-fiction. And again, I think something that is unusual, because what we think of non-fiction and what's out there and what the gaps are and how people have tried to fill it over the years is something that's worth exploring. And again, I think because we still find gaps, we lose out the big picture, and we can't find it. It's always very tenuous with non-fiction. And then when you look at putting together non-fiction for activities for children, you see, okay, there's a gap in this and gap in that and so on. And Nivedita's chapter really helps us kind of get a grip on that. And I would urge you to all to kind of see how she presents non-fiction for us. And again, like I said for the other things, one other thing that this chapter does, which I think the other sections of the book also do, is that it talks about the voice of the child. How do children respond to non-fiction? Just like I've tried to see that with my chapter on morals, how do you include children in making decisions in reading and responding to books, right? And similarly with Deepa's chapter on illustrations. All of these chapters include that perspective, just like the practitioner chapters do later, which I won't talk about now, but I think that is also important to see why that stands out in this book. Then finally in this section we have Devika Rangachari's chapter on on young adult books. And here again, I because Shailaja has shared some examples, I thought I'd share just a little bit from this particular chapter where you have, sorry, I lost my, So again, Devika gives fantastic examples, of books that have been created for young adults, because also in the times that this particular compendium talks about, there's been a change in how we have approached looking at education for children. And in that particular context, if you look at the books that have come out, even now we face a challenge of getting, especially the young adult books across, convincing educators, convincing teachers on how, how to use them. And this last section in this chapter, gatekeepers and acceptance. I'll just read a paragraph. As with all other categories of children's literature, YA literature also remains firmly within the sensorial purview of adult gatekeepers, themselves the biggest obstacles in any child's reading journey, in my view. The desperate need to monitor the content of books that young adults read when they are otherwise exposed to violence, human savagery, and deeply informing information through mass media on a daily basis is an incomprehensible one. Juxtapose this with the fact that the market for more challenging books in this genre is ever widening, perhaps a dual play of strategic marketing by publishers and more purchasing power and book-related awareness of older adolescents, and you have a classic ostrich syndrome. Now, how do you tackle this? And I think for that you need to look at Devika's chapter. Really wonderful, and this kind of brings to the close this section, which also has another section of on the a voices chapter by Sandhya, Soumya Rajendran. As a writer, what does it mean to write a book, right? And that's also as important, because many of us here are writers and have really contributed to this wonderful world of books that we have put out. And I think Soumya in that way captures her journey in creating this, the books that she did. So that is about section 2. And I hope as you go along, this book is not to be read by section. You can dip into any chapter. So look at them, and I hope you get a sense of what the last 40 years of content looks like in these books.
Akhila, will you please introduce section 3?
Yeah. So I might be the only non-author here introducing a section for all of you. So section 3, can we go forward? Yeah. Section 3 talks about issues in Indian children's literature, contemporary Indian children's literature. And the first chapter is that by Tultul Biswas on representing diverse childhoods. I think all of us sitting here realize how important it is for children to see their lives and worlds reflected in the books that they read. Not each book that they pick up, but at least some or a majority of the books that they read should have that reaffirmation of their existence, their worlds, and so on. So she sort of sets the stage for why this is an important issue to be talked about. We are all very familiar with the windows and mirrors metaphor for the functions of children's books, but she extends that and she says, let's look at them as sliding doors, and can children who are also being represented step out and sort of experience other worlds and sort of experience that change themselves. I thought that was very interesting. And in addition to looking at the question of which children are being represented in contemporary children's books, she also talks about who are the intended readers and who are the creators of these books, you know. So what are the socio-political, cultural locations of these people in creating these books. I thought that was very interesting because we usually in lay discourses confine ourselves to the first question. She also is thinking about the other two. And she's using this as a framework to look at representation of gender, sexuality, caste, class, language in our children's books. She uses very rich examples to present her analysis, and you may agree or not agree with some of those examples. I invite you to read the book and see what you think, but I think the larger analysis, the larger points still ring very true. The second chapter is by Namita Jacob and Teresa Anthony. We have Teresa here who will talk about her chapter in a bit, but they talk about accessible publishing basically, and I'll let her talk about it in a bit after I finish. The third chapter we have is that on translation. This is very interesting because this is the only chapter where we have three separate pieces by stalwarts like Jerry Pinto, Manisha Chaudhary, and Arunava Sinha. And they're each talking about their own experiences of, you know, the process of translating. Translating for children, writing for children, and so on, and the challenges, the pitfalls, and sometimes the hard choices they've had to make in this process. They use very interesting examples to talk about what these choices have been. And we, I think as creators of the book, we also realize that in a country like ours, in a multilingual country like ours, it's not just the craft of translation that needs to be talked about, but perhaps a second volume could also talk about other issues relating to regional language publishing, the market, the economics of it. What are the publishing models that work for regional language publishing? Should we bring out a book in 8 languages simultaneously? Should we have workshops in different parts of the country? How do we support young translators, and so on and so forth? So there's so many other issues that I think we'd like to discuss in another volume. And in the last chapter of this book, which is Innovations in Indian Children's Literature in English by V. Geeta and Divya Vijay Kumar of Tara Books. You are all aware of Tara Books' work, but here they reflect on that process. They focus on the visual aesthetic, their innovations in the book design process, how they have sort of made possible collaborations of indigenous artists, art forms, and also international collaborations. So they reflect on this entire process. So I thought this section was so amazing in highlighting the issues of representation, accessibility, translations, innovations. We realize these are not exhaustive, but I think a very good starting point. Yeah. Thank you.
So first I'd like to say thank you for including this chapter. I think it's something Namita and I were both very excited about because we've been working in this field but never had a voice, a place where we could actually say everything we want to say and, highlight all these key issues that we see now. So this chapter, it begins by telling you about the different kinds of impairments that exist. Children with disabilities account for a large part of our population. It's around 78 lakhs, which is quite massive. And a large percentage of that is children with print disabilities. Now, print disability is anyone who cannot access a book off the shelf. It may be because they have motor disabilities. It may be because they have impairments in vision. It could also be that comprehension is a hard thing to grasp. So what we do through this book is we know that throughout our history there have been many chances, many opportunities and constant efforts to make publishing accessible to people with disabilities. But what we see is, it is in children's books, it is very limited. There are efforts in, creating these picture books that allow, that easily allow for a child with a disability to interact with it, but not all do. So what we talk about is this, this aspect called born accessible books, and that's what we're trying to pitch. Born accessible books are what we call books that have already addressed a vast majority of children. It could be that the text is now laid out in a way for easy comprehension. It could be that the language used is, again, more easy to comprehend. The images are more contrasting. It's all, and what we want to debunk is this myth that accessible books are ugly. They don't have to be. They can be beautiful books with just little tweaks in text, little tweaks in illustrations. You can make a book accessible to a vast majority of these kids who currently do not have storybooks. And that is something we are trying to pitch. So we ask a lot of authors, illustrators, and anyone who's interested in this to read the books, read the chapter, and look at the way that we have presented children talking about their experience with these accessible books. What we do at our organization is we work with children with disabilities to adapt existing storybooks, and of course we create our own as well. And throughout the years we've seen that they love to read. They come in hating books and saying, oh, that's so boring, this is like another class altogether. But it's not. It's once they really get into it and once they feel all the images and, once they can actually, once it's, inside them, they can start looking at books and acquiring this language so seamlessly that reading is their leisure activity, right? It's fun, it's exciting. And that is something that we're trying to constantly do. Throughout this book, throughout our chapter rather, we talk about what exists, the different methods that already exist. Making an accessible book is, of course, the dream for all picture books to be accessible to every child, but we're aware that it is quite an expensive task and also sometimes unachievable because every child with a disability is not the same. They don't have the same sort of disability. So what we try to talk about through this book is to meet this group halfway, create a book that is accessible to a large population by tweaking elements, and which we go into detail within the book. And that is what we see as our way forward. Anyone with an additional disability can easily augment the book on their own to make it accessible further. So yeah.
So chapter 4, Karthika, section 4, can Karthika you introduce?
Shailaja, you want to move the slide? Oh, right.
So I would like to start with an anecdote. So it was December of 2019, and with a handful of books, I walked into a classroom in a small town Patanur in Kannur district of Kerala, and I was greeted by 20 eager fourth graders. So as we settled down in the classroom, one of the brave ones came up to me and presented me with a stick, and officially symbolized my position as the teacher in the classroom. So in a few days, what we did was, we got the stick out of the classroom, we disrupted the seating arrangement, we moved the desks and benches, laid out mats, and that's how we began a 5-week journey of reading and responding to literature. So we used interactive read-alouds to share the book, and we read the book in English, but we had illustrations to support meaning making, and we also discussed the book in English and Malayalam, Malayalam being children's mother tongue. And they were also allowed to respond in the language of their choice. So they mixed the languages, so we have an example for that in that chapter as well, where you can see beautiful examples where children have used both English and Malayalam to respond to a text. And as the days went by, I have noticed that children had started to make more and more connections with the books they were reading. One such response comes to mind. We had read the book Catch That Cat, and in that the protagonist Dip Tip helps save a friend's cat from a tree. At the end of the session, I just asked the children what would they do if they were in Dip Tip's position. And a child pointed out to a friend and said, "Miss, I will take Nivida's machine to help the cat." So this machine which the child was referring to was designed by a friend in a previous session, which after we had read the book, Amachi's Amazing Machines. Right? And at the end of the session, I had asked the children, would you be interested in designing a machine, and what would it do, and would you like to share it with your friends? And they had each drawn a machine and shared it. And this machine, which she designed, was called Tall Things Taking Machine. So it had 2 buttons, yellow button, which when you press it, it would go as high as possible and grab anything, and a blue button to bring the things down. So as you see in this discussion, they were borrowing from the book, but they were also borrowing from their friends' ideas to respond to literature. So they were really coming together as a community of readers. And this is not an isolated incident in a small town, Kerala. We can, in our chapter, our co-author Shreya also presents her classroom from rural West Bengal, where she shared literature with children and had very discussions and meaningful discussions about complex topics like grief and death. So this may not be the kind of conversations which you might expect in an Indian classroom, but what we are trying to say through our chapter is that it is possible. And it takes time, but it is possible. So in our chapter, which is engaging children through literature in early language classroom, Dr. Shailaja, Menon, Shreya Rakshit, and I, tells you like how we can go about doing this. How do you build a supporting culture which supports such interactions? And we also outline some core pedagogical considerations which you can take with you when you share literature in the classroom. And our chapter is in section 4, which is all about how to use books with the children, how you connect books to children and children to books. And the next chapter in that is Sujata Narono's chapter, Children's Responses to Literature. And in that, Sujata also presents many interesting examples where children are resisting the text, engaging with the text and reflecting. And we can see when she was trying to present a book to the child says, "I'm not interested in this book because this book is about a rich child. So it does not interest me." And the child refused to engage with the book. On probing further on how he came to that conclusion, the child pointed to the floor and said, "This floor is tiled." Right? And this is an indicator or the evidence he produced. So she was able to take the conversations further, and the child took on a personal project of going through the library, finding evidence of richness in all the books. So in the chapter, what she tries to tell us is the importance of bringing books to children, and also about listening very closely to their responses, because that is how we understand how they experience and see the world we all live in. And the final chapter in our section is by Mridula Koshi, and it's about free library movements in India. Here, Mridula talks about importance and urgent need for libraries and reading spaces in India. And she, in a very unequal and caste-ridden society like ours, where historically a majority of people have been kept away from reading and access to reading materials, she envisions library as a space for equitable access to resources. She looks at library as a space where all readers are welcome. A reader without an ID card, a reader who's illiterate, a reader who is not doing well in class, where all readers are welcome. And she also, she talks about a community library project and how it has been a platform for the free library movement, which advocates for no cost, anti-caste, non-discriminatory free library for all. So, a free library network has over 103 organizations registered. So if you're interested in libraries and how to use books with children, that chapter would really interest you. Thank you.
Can I request Usha Mukunda to speak to her chapter?
So I'll start on a personal... Oh, sorry. It's on. Can you all hear me? So I'll start on a personal note that I'm so happy to be here today and see so many familiar faces that I hadn't seen for so long. That really gave me a lot of joy. Also, for those of you whom I don't know, just brief introduction. I've been a school and children's librarian for 40 years. I must be the oldest one in this room, by the way. I don't know if I rate applause for that, for just growing old. Anyway, but it's been a calling that has brought me much learning and immense joy, actually. So, in that sense, I'm happy to be part of this amazing book. It's such a comprehensive book in the sense that it has touched upon all aspects of life, of a child's life, of our own environment, and I can't think of anything that has been missed out. Congratulations to the editors. So I'm sorry, I've had to make notes, so I'll just talk about that. And Karthika, thank you so much for covering the chapter. I was getting a bit nervous that I may be asked to cover this chapter. Fortunately, you did it so well. And I want to just deviate a bit from what I want to say to tell you that some years ago I was interacting with children at an Urdu government school near my home. And I took a story and I read it out and they were very happy, of course. But the minute the story ended, there was chaos. There was chaos in the classroom, really. Of course, the teacher wasn't there to enforce the discipline. And just like your example, a child came up to me with a stick and said, "Take this and start beating the children." So when you gave that example, I thought, oh my God, this is happening in most places. It's true. So I'm really happy to be with you two today. Pity that others who pity that others who were to come haven't come. So to the book. I think for me, one of the unique features of this book is the collaborative spirit in its creation. Don't read this. I really mean that because right from the start, all of us were asked to suggest themes, titles for the book, and just comment on the overall structure. And this was amazing. I personally may not have contributed much, but as it was evolving, as the book was evolving, I could see how different suggestions had been taken on and sort of absorbed, and interesting other things were coming out. I could see that. Sorry, I have some new glasses, so I'm trying to get used to it. So basically, I want to say that this collaborative aspect, you will see it when you see the book. I think you will find that the book has benefited greatly from this collective thinking. I feel so. Another unusual feature is the presence of voices across the book. Now, some of you have talked about the personal element in these voices. I totally agree. I'm one of those voices. So yes, it was writing it was a personal journey of love, actually. So that was nice. These vignettes from a writer, a publisher, an illustrator, an editor, and a reader and a library educator like myself highlight, I think, the close connection and interrelatedness between the making of a book, the reading of the book, and the reflections emerging from that reading. When you go through the voices, you will hear a refrain that is present in each of the voices. If you wish to pick up that recurring melody, I'm going to imitate one of the children at a book talk in the library and say, read for yourself and find out. More seriously, these voices, I feel, contain in them other diverse voices. I think that was something that really struck me, that these are not, they are personal, but they're not unidimensional, if that's the right word. And this layered sharing is very valuable to us, to know the inner workings of a book before we see it as a finished product. Many of us see it as a finished product, but it's been lovely to understand the journey the book has made through all these voices. Coming to this last section, which Karthika talked about so well, As You Sow, Using Books with Children. I love that title. I'll let you figure out what the significance of that. As a children's librarian, I am really honored to be in the company of an iconic librarian, Sujata Narona, and I'm really sorry she's not here today. Children's literature aficionado, Shailaja Menon, and her colleagues, Karthika and Shreya, a public library movement pioneer, Bidula Koshi, whom I admire greatly for what she's done, and a totally candid and insightful reader like Keerthi Mukunda. This section actually reflects the culmination of all the earlier chapters in the book. That's my feeling. Though Teju did say that there are conversations with children in earlier chapters, somehow for me it was that this section brought together all the things that had been said right into a practical realm, with children. I felt that it was, as I said, the culmination of all the earlier chapters because it's grounded in a library or a classroom which children, that is the readers, inhabit. And it demonstrates all that has been covered in the section so far. So I felt somehow that this last section just blossoms into, yes, this is it. This is what is happening when a child is reading a book. It opens a window, I feel, into how conversations can happen around books through modeling, of course, but also through serendipity. And also it gives instances of such encounters and chats, and I thought that's very valuable. I hope that the buzz of the children's voices we have highlighted in this section will resonate in every home and community, so that we can all enjoy these questions and reaffirm the importance of listening to children. For me, that's very important. Finally, I've been asked to give you a teaser trailer from my part. I'm just following instructions, by the way. So let me try. I think my article reveals the need for the active presence of a librarian in every school and community. I am biased, I fully admit that, but I really do feel that the presence of a live and aware librarian is very important. And this is a person who senses the reading pulse of every child she interacts with. I would like to emphasize the word every, because the article that I've written shows the vital importance of being in touch with readers in all spaces and all kinds of readers as well, including non-readers. Okay, that's very important. Each of these so-called categories is fluid, and my piece validates that with actual examples. I hope you'll read it. The chapter also touches upon the learning curve of the librarian and how every encounter and every exchange with a child, with a young adult, with a teacher, with a parent, and another librarian bring fresh insight and energy. I hope I have also been able to showcase a number of diverse books which give you, the readers, a glimpse of the array in children's literature in India. And I'm happy to see so many of the books right there at Funky Rainbow's outlet. Please do look at them. I think I have covered whatever you asked me to, and I hope I've done it within the time.
Yes,
thank you so much.
Thank you very
everybody.
much, Usha. One more voice from Keerthi Mukunda. By the way, Usha and Keerthi, for those of you who don't know, are mother and daughter and teachers at Centre for Learning.
Hi, so yeah, I am a teacher at Centre for Learning School in Bangalore. But I began as one of those resistant readers, as she said, or much to my mother's frustration, a non-reader. And
but I have worked with non-readers.
Okay, yeah. Now, yeah. But yeah, so I'm in this section that Sujata has written, it's titled Children's Responses to Literature. And as you know, Sujata Narona is a library educator. I visited her library bookworm as part of an excursion from CFL. And I was really moved to see us collect books from the library, which was a building, to a beach and read books on a mat with the fishing community there. I'll never forget that experience. So I've known her for a long while, and I was very felt lucky to be in her chapter as a voice of a reader. So yeah, and if ever a chapter feels like a conversation, it was this one. I just felt I was in that classroom, in that library, having that conversation. And my bit basically shares how I felt I had an identity as a non-reader. I wasn't a good reader. I felt, whatever picture I had then of someone who's, a bookworm or always cuddled up with a book or can't seem to put something down, I wasn't that. And I kind of labeled myself as, okay, this is never going to happen. But over the years and through actually finding books that were speaking to me, I did find a role of, some kind of a definition of, I'm also a reader. And so while that identity is just a very small cloud in the back of my mind, now I work with readers who are all along the spectrum, and I find it very enriching. So my piece is a bit like a journal entry, and I pour my heart out, and then it ends with how I feel today, which doesn't have that identity anymore. So thank you.
Thank you, Parag.
So thanks everyone. We have a very good idea of what this book is about. Sandhya, would you like to tell us what it is not about? What are its limitations and boundaries?
Says it's about everything. Well, first of all, I have to admit that I haven't gone through the book after it was published. As every editor will know, there is always the fear. Invariably, editors will find that the first thing they'll find when they open a page is a mistake. I don't want to find that mistake, so I haven't looked at it at all. I've been happily carrying it around. I looked at the table of contents and then just shut it again. So, we have read in his file. And thank you, Usha, for saying that it says everything that needs to be said, but I must beg to differ. But before that, just to clarify, I mean, the one thing we feel, Shailaja and I feel really, really bad about is that it does not reflect what is happening in our Indian languages. Believe me, we tried very hard. We initially started with trying to focus on at least 3 other Indian languages apart from English. Then we settled on Hindi. We said, okay. Until the time the book was actually already in press, we were chasing after it. But that chapter didn't come. So that's when we decided that we started drumming up some kind of lobby for to whoever would speak to us from Parag for a second volume. So that could concentrate on, and that we know is a big gap in this book, and we beg forgiveness for that, right? But I have to also add that wherever an author, a writer, contributor has been familiar with work in an Indian language, for instance, in Teju's chapter, you will find he refers to Kannada language, a few Kannada language books. Radhika refers to some works in Malayalam. And there are references to works in Hindi as well. That's not to say it compensates, it does not. So this, it is not. The second thing is, I personally think this book is too fat. It weighs almost a kilo, and we want everybody to carry this book around and read it wherever, So we've already covered quite a few aspects of children's literature, but we realized that we've left out more than we have actually covered. And for that reason, again, we need a third volume. And there have been, I have to also share this with you, there have been a couple of instances of people feeling a little bit left out. That, they were not called upon to write about X aspect or Y topic or Z topic. It was not deliberate, and we did, as Usha mentioned, it was a collaborative effort from the very beginning. We discussed so many things, including the kind of chapters we should have, and then, it came down to this list on very practical grounds. These were people who responded and said they would write. It was as simple as that. So yes, there's plenty that has not been spoken about. I won't list all that now, but we hope that will be taken care of. And the other thing that this book is not about is, it's not about showcasing publishers. It is about the kind of literature, the kind of reading material that is available to children, to librarians, to readers, to adults, to everybody. It is not, so there was a danger every now and then of it becoming a showcase of publishers, and we did try very hard to tone it down, but we could not, you cannot eliminate it altogether. We have not been entirely successful in doing that, but that was something that was working on our minds. And there is one other thing that I thought of that has just flown out of my head.
It's not an academic one.
Yeah, Shailaja and I had she is a stalwart in her area. I completely bow down to that. I am totally non-academic, but I have to place on record that we had a wonderful relationship working through this book. I learned so much from her, and I hope that she learned from me. And Akhila was there on call all the time, you know, helping us through this journey. So I'll take this moment also to thank the support that we have received from everybody at Parag, every single person. Thank you.
WhatsApp group to be on. If the 2 chapters that we were expecting from Hindi authors had come in, the paneer maker would have become a murder weapon. So in that sense, you guys have been spared.
Shailaja, so, I mean, when we say, you know, Indian children's literature here, so to what extent is Indian children's literature Indian? And also, you know, like, where do you think our work lies as a community still to strengthen the Indian children's literature?
Parul, are you Indian? No, I'm just asking. If I say Indian stories or Indian literature, what comes to mind? I mean, this is a truly discerning audience, so I'm sure many things will come to mind. But for an average person, if you go out into the, you know, into a mall or wherever and say, tell me an Indian story, what do you think people will tell? Panchatantra. Anything else? The mythology, etc. So we have sort of stereotyped what being Indian means, right? So in that sense, this work, the contemporary work, sort of frees us from those stereotypes. As I'm saying, like all of us. Are we Indian? What language are we speaking in? What political system do we have? What kind of economic system do we use? What kind of a space? What is this book launch event? And what are these? Are these Indian? Did our great-grandparents have them? Are we performing an Indian act right now in this room? And if so, then the literature that we are producing is also Indian. So, you know, it has been critiqued a little bit by people saying that, you know, it is entirely derived from the West. It's entirely a Western derivative. There's nothing really unique or Indian about Indian children's literature. But then, you know, for me, the problem with that kind of a criticism is that you have a conception of a pure culture existing in vacuum. Do cultures exist like that? Do we have little bounded bubbles of this is Indian and this is American and this is whatever? Definitely not. You know, that's just a figment of our imagination. In reality, we are all hybrid. Especially post-colonial societies like us, our subjectivities inside us, we are hybridized. So where from can we produce something that is pure or from eons ago? You know, not to say that mythology has not informed us and our traditional stories have not informed us, but as I've just shown you with Deepa Kiran's chapter, we are remaking them in this present hybrid moment. You know, so this person, critical theorist called Homi Bhabha, not the physicist, but Homi Bhabha, who talks about this third space that comes into creation when multiple cultures interact. And so this hybridization is just a very natural phenomenon. So to that extent, I would say that Indian stories are very much Indian. Okay. Did I exit?
You want which section?
Those slides. So sorry. Just the images. I'm just going to quickly flash some contemporary things that you are all familiar with. So I've put. Just Teju, one more. I'm just going to quickly go over. Yeah. So my dear co-editor has written this book, My Mother's Sari. I'm putting very well-known books up here, not that they're exhaustive at all. Is this an Indian story about her mother's sari? No, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, the focus is to, I mean, I'm not trying to dwell on any of these books in particular. I'm just showing you, just quickly, some Indian books. Where is that cat? A little child goes looking for her cat. Is that Indian? You know, I'm just asking you, I mean, Priya Korean's book about her Ammachi's glasses going missing. Is that Indian? I'm just asking you, what is Indian? Beauty is Missing is another story set in Kerala, you know, where the buffalo goes missing and the buffalo's name is Beauty. Stray dog, Dugga, or those three-legged dogs that we see all around us. Is that Indian? So, I mean, and so, this was one of my very, very favorite books, the London Jungle Book, where he sort of inverted, it's a tribal person going to London and then reinterpreting through, we are so accustomed as post-colonial people to have our experiences reinterpreted through white lenses, and here is a tribal reinterpreting the white world through the tribal lens. So, and so on and so forth. I don't mean to say that, oh, by the way, these are non-fiction, quite unlike the non-fiction books that I showed you, you know. So anyway, you know, there's so many of you sitting here who have produced marvelous books. I didn't mean in any way to exclude you all or to say that this is comprehensive. You know, these are stories of Indian princesses and queens from this historical fiction. Is that Indian? You know, so in that sense, we are producing, I would argue, extremely relevant contemporary Indian fiction, Indian books, Indian literature. But there was a second part to your question, which was, where do you see the work, our work lying? I call this the hang phenomenon, where we are all, I have forgotten now what hang stands for. So, no, I've let this actor, I thought was very clever and now forgotten what it all stands for. But anyway, in short, we are all upper class. Teju, sorry. I meant largely, this is a population of women, English speaking, so that ENG was English, and I've completely forgotten what the H and the A was, but we are, you know, upper middle class, urban, English speaking women, by and large, dominate the children's literature field. This is not to exclude people like Teju and Sham who are there and various other brilliant men who are part of this community. But I just feel it's a very exclusionary community still in many ways. And that we need to sort of consciously expand and bring in other voices, for example, of Mohammad Khadir Babu or Jacinta Karketa, whoever. We have a few such examples, but we need many more where people speak and write of their own experiences for themselves, rather than us babysitting other groups and saying, here is one on tribal culture and here is one on, you know, we have one on every community, but it's the same kind of people producing these books. So I think that is a real problem. And the second really big problem is that of access of books, which is what Mridula Koshi talks about in her Free Libraries movement. Children it's a minuscule proportion of children in our country who are able to access the kinds of expansions and innovations that we are sitting here discussing today. This is a very privileged space and privileged discourse, and I would like to see it being democratized. Shayoni Basu in her chapter talks about the fact that we keep saying there's such rapid expansion in children's literature. But we have 36 crore children in our country. So we are on average, even if you take all this expansion into account, we are spending, the market is about 4 rupees per child. That's a stark figure. So I'm really concerned with access and with broadening our community to include other kinds of voices.
Thanks, Shailaja. So this concludes, you know, one section of our session, and you know, there are contributors to the book who we are acutely missing here today, like, you know, the authors who couldn't join us, people at Parag and Trust and other editorial assistants, you know, like Ini, and then people at Trust and Parag like Swaha, Amrita, Priyanka. The team at, the publisher itself, Eklavya, Tultul would have joined us, but she could not. And I don't think we could have brought out, you know, this paperback of this quality, both in content and production, unless we had Eklavya as a publisher. You know, we would not have been able to bring it out at a price point of, you know, close to 400 rupees, or the hardbound at 1200 rupees. So just want to acknowledge, you know, the role of Eklavya as a publisher. As most of us know, Eklavya is an education non-profit based out of Bhopal, and a very grassroots based organization for whom children's publishing is also now a very important part of their work. Also, I'm acutely missing Taposhi Ghoshal, who's done this brilliant illustration, the brilliant cover illustration. Yeah, so just want to conclude this section with a big round of applause to everybody who's contributed. And like Usha ji said, as in it's been a huge collaborative effort, and we hope many such more efforts happen in the sector, and we've already got ideas for the future books. So, yeah. So, yes. So, now we'll open the floor for questions and thoughts, and I know many of us here have already, read much of the book, would love to hear from them, would love to hear from those who haven't read either. I was thinking maybe to first invite, we are also today joined by Jane Sahi ji. So maybe first of all, just wanted to, Jane, anything you'd like to say?
You have put me in a very awkward position because I have only read parts of the book, which I have greatly enjoyed. And I think what Sandhya said about including other languages is a vital part. But also, what do we mean by a culture of reading? I think that's something which could be added. But there's so much in the book, it's so rich, and it's been, it was something that was not there. And it's filled a huge vacuum, actually, to enable people to have a really panoramic view of what children's literature in India is just now. So I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the book, especially after today's session, and I'm very glad that I was able to be here.
Thank you. I have a question since all of you, this is a captive audience, so you're not going anywhere till you answer my question. Two questions actually. One, what aspects of children's literature, Indian children's literature, do you think are missing from the book? So what would you like to be discussed further, written about further? That's one. And okay, let's deal with this one first.
First of all, thanks a lot for doing this. I haven't read the book yet, but I know I'm going to have a copy, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be giving it away to people as well. Couple of things I would like to see. I'm an educator, I'm a special educator as well, so I'm very happy to see an inclusive chapter on it. Some of the issues we find in publishing are that chronologically a child is a certain age, but their reading level is different, and therefore they have to then go with books that are for younger kids. So that's one thing I'd like for people to keep in mind. The second one is, again, I've not read the book, but we want voices of children as well. Like you said that it's exclusionary in one level, it's still adults writing for children. Right? We've had a Samhita Arni who as a child has published. But what can we do to get more children to come and publish books? Because I think some of us, me for sure, what I was as a child I have forgotten now. Much as we'd like to keep it, the kind of thinking that a child does is not always there in a book. The other thing I would like now, Parag has like maybe chapter 4 coming up then. Can we have a section for like an idiot's guide for parents? And I don't mean it in a bad way. I just mean it for discerning parents who don't have the time to do what a lot of us did. We went and curated for ourselves, we went and found out, we looked. But everyone either doesn't know that it's required or don't know then what to look for. Right? And most of the time they say moral stories. Now children don't like moral stories because they moralize to them. But they can take it in different ways, and there are beautiful books that do it. But as a parent who is not empowered, where do I go? And that would be good because then I would be sending that around as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for asking that question. So my question is also in a sort of continuation there. So when we heard you all speak, you made it a point to say that it's not an academic book. And I think that is something that would deter schools from picking it up. Yeah. So like she mentioned, not like an idiot's guide, but if there could be, points put in for academic practitioners, it could lead more schools to pick up the book. And, I know it's difficult because when we start introducing academic things into it, then we always run that risk of crossing the border and going completely into a textbook. But then if this is not done, then no teacher is going to pick it up. I work both with an NGO and I work freelance. And this is an opposition that I've seen with schools across the spectrum. Privileged schools, under-resourced schools, all of them have the same thing. What are our children going to learn? So if we put this as a teaser maybe, maybe it would influence them to pick up the book, which would then lead to a deeper exploration of ideas. So that is something that I felt would be a huge value add. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I just want to clarify before the next question. I think Shailaja had clarified that although it's not a technically academic book, a lot of research has gone into it, and perhaps what you say might kind of give some direction to schools or whatever. But the other thing I'd like to say is one of the reasons for this book is to help whoever's reading it to get children to read.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I mean, as somebody who's read more than half of the book.
Yeah. Okay, so first to your point, ma'am, we do have, as an organization, we are an NGO too. And what we do, actually to both the questions, is what we do is we work with children with disabilities. We work with not just disabilities, any child. We publish online for free children's stories, stuff that they have written. And that is available. It is a movement that is happening. It is available. If it's not, of course, published in print, but it's published online and available in print. Anyone can download it. As for books that can be linked to curriculum goals, currently what we are working on with educators around anywhere in India is we're linking national curriculum goals to our self-published books. We work along with authors, anybody who is interested in creating books with the disability aspect access in place. We publish those books online and link the NCERT goals to that. So what you would see soon enough is we would be putting up this little template that showcases the different domains, right? So if you're working on social emotional goals, or you're working on physical goals, you're working on all these different aspects, we link it to books and activities that have that, and also give you a little subset of books that are published by Tulika, Curry Tales, and all these different publications. We link different books that access that reach that same goal. So it is happening. It's just a little silent, but it's happening. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So just a couple of things. One is that this book is, I'm speaking, maybe something that you wanted to share, but it struck me when you said, because there's a lot of stuff that's there that give you activities. Okay, you do activities for this, activities for this, the kind of list that you were talking about. There's plenty of that available. Every organization has done that. But right now what you don't have is a book that gives you perspective. And that's the purpose of this book. So if you read this book, you get perspectives on many matters that are important, matters of not just of content, but also pedagogy and practice. So all of this is absolutely important, and therefore you need to read this book. And it's not to dismiss what you said, but that is there. This is not that book. Maybe somebody has to pull all those resources, create a website, and tell them, go and look it up there. curate, I don't know what you call it, crowdsource everything and put it in one place. There's plenty of that. This is not there. So you have to tell your teachers, go and read this for another reason, not for the reason that they ask you for, right? Thanks.
I also wanted to respond to you to say that this last chapter, as you saw, in fact, I think quite deliberately, none of us have been prescriptive in what we have said. To rephrase the letters is the word you used. So it's a deliberate move not to be prescriptive, but to allow the reader and the discerning teacher to read, think for himself or herself, and then, act. So I feel that is the only way we can reach out to teachers and librarians as well, because for years I have interacted with librarians, and it's not enough to just give them lists of books and activities to do, because that's it. It ends there. But we have to help them to think for themselves what it's doing, how to do this, and what the effect is. See for themselves how movement happens, right? So I hope that helps.
Yeah, definitely, ma'am. So just a last thing that I wanted to say, I totally agree with all the research that has gone into the book. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. And for me as a practitioner, it gave me so much of background or insight as to, how we got to where we are today and, all the prejudices that are already there. So for me, the question or, the thing that I was struggling with, which I think you all have answered, is that, how do I get people to pick up the book? Of course, I will read it. And I did read it. So my only thing was, how do we nudge more people to get into it? So yeah, thank you. Thank you for, sharing that.
At the back, there are some. Vivek?
Yeah. One second. I'll just put a small thing, because Parul was saying that there's a genie who will answer to all the things that we ask for. So I thought, why not ask? So I was just wondering if we have another book volume of it, if there can be one chapter on climate change and environment, something which from a very young age, how do we introduce that, and what kind of literature we have in India. So I thought that will really help. And if publishers can also, as she was also saying, that if publishers can look at the children's book written, because I've just finished with a course on young climate authors, and there are lovely books written by children. Maybe I can just share the link. And if that can go into mainstream, I think it speaks a lot. So yeah, that's my wish. Thank you.
I wanted to talk about this whole thing of movement towards own voices. And as an author, there's always been this dilemma as to how do you get children or even adults within a certain community or within a certain circumstance to be able to express their stories eloquently as a writer would do. And honestly, I have no idea what to say about this and how to make sense of it. How to bridge that gap that exists, because often there are stories out there in certain sections of our society which really they're begging to be told. But the people who are actually living those lives are not empowered enough to be able to express them. So how do we, how do we bridge that gap? It's a huge puzzle for me.
In fact, this would be a very, very good topic to write about, in the next, because it's a very serious issue. And this whole thing of appropriating cultures on the one hand, and the question of, I think all children have imaginations, all children can write, all children can draw. Then do we publish all their works? That's another question. So these are very important issues, I think, that we need to reflect on and research, talk to more people, and I think perhaps we'll find some answers in the next book.
Thank you.
I think Tultul's chapter that I was talking about earlier on representation, she touches upon this issue of authors successfully having authentically represented others' lives and done so sensitively through long collaborations with those communities. So it has been done. Even she is exploring this question in her chapter actually, and actually presents some examples successful examples of books having done it.
Also in chapter 10, if you look at it, Thinking Out of the Box, Innovations and Approaches, that chapter by V. Geeta and Divya Vijay Kumar, there's quite a detailed discussion of how one publisher, that's Tara Books, has attempted and the mistakes they made in the beginning and how they kind of shifted over time. So I would urge you to look at that as well. So this has been covered in the book in bits and pieces in different chapters, but again, I like you probably said that you...
Also you can understand when someone is actually working with them, it becomes it can be overwhelming. Yeah. Back at the back? Yeah, okay.
And this side has not received, this side of the room has not received the mic.
Yeah, you can, please pass the mic there. Behind.
Hi. Yeah, so this is Nitesh, and I see that we rarely have books for mute curious kids. My son is around mute curious kids in Indian literature especially. As I forgot her name, she said that children books are largely dominated by upper caste as urban people, women. I should especially say they're Brahmins. It also reflects in children books literature. To their credit, they did very good books. I should appreciate them. My son loves them all. But my son is fed with meat from about age of 6 months. And WHO strongly argues for that too, because it gives them a lot of proteins as such. So, and I had to get books from, import the books through Amazon. Books like I Love Going to Butcher Shop and Sonia's Kitchen, all that. They're lovely books. They speak about animal agriculture, and they speak about co-living, and when the chicken dies, the fox catches the chicks, and it makes food for its kids. So it's how they co-live. We don't see that books in Indian literature, and the reason for that is it's dominated by, it's very less. There is one book by Anveshi. I have, there's one book by Anveshi. I did my fair research on that. And so there is one book by Anveshi, and we did our first book on seafood. And there is one book in omelette, that's also in Kannada and Tulu, in fact. It's a bilingual book. But I don't see any of our major publishers touching that subjects quite often. And my sons are quite agitated by it, because he don't see that. He doesn't like vegetables as such, but we make it a priority that we give him vegetables because of fiber in it. So all that facts. But his schools also advocates for it. And schools, while they are very very adamant on, some schools are giving Jain foods, but they keep the non-veg away. I'm searching a school for my first year kid, first standard for he's in 5+ years now. So, but that's been a death in our children literature as well. That's quite is larger community who enjoy eating fish. We don't cover that. I think we should make effort, and through these books also we should cover those aspects so that we cover that quite well. And it's important for I saw through Tultul's cover also. 1 minute, madam. Tultul's chapter, where she covers quite extensively on other chapter, caste, gender, all that. Doesn't cover, and Pongal's reference on the not meat, it's on the experience or something, but doesn't speak especially on the food. We want really books on mute curious kids. I think it's not a problem with India, it's a problem with in the world as well. So I think we should cover that. I think the next book will
No, actually you make a very interesting point, and when we talk about inclusive, it means all of these things. And just to share one example, in one of my stories, I had included a recipe, a Kashmiri recipe, which was based using lamb. And the person who was publishing the book wanted me to change it to a vegetarian dish, and I had to make it brinjal.
One other book other than the Anveshi one is Machar Jol. You can, yeah. But it's a very interesting and very good point, so noted.
Interestingly, just one more thing. So again, this book, thanks for highlighting that some chapters do cover them, but there are some chapters, this happens across other chapters as well. So I urge you to read that. It's something that I think people are aware of, and it's also on the publishers to not take decisions of this kind, of asking writers to shift. So for publishers to be aware and say, okay, what do we publish against the grain, right? And then actually take decisions of that kind is also important. Sorry.
One last question from this side of the room. Yeah.
So it's a wonderful effort and initiative to bring in so many perspectives. So I actually agree with whatever the points raised here. Along with that, I think if we could bring the parents' perspective, that is something I feel is needed, because while interacting with parents, I have always felt that they are actually lost. I don't say everybody, but there are a lot of parents who have no clue about reading or what books to give to children. I mean, there's a huge gap, and I mean, it's a gray area is what I felt. So along with that, the diversity in the Indian literature, I mean the children's literature is something I feel it should be specially dealt in a chapter. The inclusiveness and the diversity, as he has said, is not just with food, with multiple things, the issues that are not touched, the issues that are not reflected or told to the children. As he has told, like I do understand in many cases where even my maid was telling today that her teacher told not to send non-veg food to the school in the tiffin. So, and the child was not ready to eat the veg food. This conversation incidentally happened today morning. And she was just wondering, what do I do now? So I feel the children's book or the literature should touch on all the aspects what the parents face, the children's face, the society, what we see. So thank you.
Thank you.
Last, very last question.
PIC has told us to be strict with time.
Yeah. So actually I had one point regarding what could be included, but the question which I wanted Keerthi Mukunda to answer is that you said that you were a non-reader, and in this book you have come across as a reader speaks. So, so I just wanted to, how did you transform from being a non-reader to a reader, maybe?
Yeah, I guess I was coming from a picture of what a good reader is. At home, of course, we had shelves and shelves of books, or my friends would be reading. So I think just stumbling along, like a gift from someone of this book, Anne Frank's diary, and then connecting with it in some emotional way. So each book had its own reason. It wasn't like recommended by an adult, or it just connected to me personally, and then became, oh, it's my classic now. But I think it didn't follow the, conventional journey, and that's what made me feel different. But yeah.
I should also say that as editors, we considered asking somebody who identified as a phenomenal reader to write this chapter, and then we decided that that's not what we want as the voice of a reader. So this is more of a typical reader who's had a patchwork journey through reading, which would be reflective of most human reality. There are very, very few of us who take instantly to books, click and go. So we're trying to sort of present a more realistic picture.
Sorry, I just want to add that, I had mentioned that these are very fluid categories that we make, maybe as adults, parents, teachers, librarians. So a non-reader needn't be stuck there. Non-reader can move very, like a prolific reader might suddenly drop off. So we have to be aware that these are all movements that or situations that are fluid and move. So when she started by saying she's a non-reader, but she wrote a chapter called A Reader Speaks, that's how.
Teju wants to add.
No, not to this.
Sorry, I mean, BIC has another event in this hall. So because of that constraint, we are not able to take more questions, but the editors are here, the authors are here, and we can all use hall 2 also for more interactions, and so please, the questions that we couldn't answer right now, would love to take them over the conversations after the event. So hall 2 is the back of this room. Yeah, so the back of the room is hall 2. Yeah.
There'll be this divider will come. Don't get stuck here.
There are also signed copies of the book, of the books by the editors. That's there.
They will be available for sign.
We are going to sign.
Sure, yeah. So there are copies and there are editors, so that will get signed. So also, like as I had said, we put a message board. Would love to hear from you your wishes for the Indian children's literature sector. And with this, yes, and the counter with Funky Rainbow is also here at least till 1:15. So just request you to spend time. They put in a lot of effort to bring all these books.
Buy the books. Also, I mean, I just want to end with thanking Shailaja and Sandhya. I mean, the incredible effort and energy that has gone into putting this together, I have seen myself. It was a complex up and down journey, and it wouldn't have happened without them. I mean, just big round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Teju. So thanks everyone, and here's hoping that the unique role that each one of us plays in spreading the joys of reading to children continues, and we keep coming and keep working together, and hope to see all of you again. Thank you.